Discover the career of your dreams. Learn how to get your foot in the door, stand out, and create the life you desire. This is our time. This is our adventure. Together, you and I will explore the world, discover what's possible, and eradicate wasted potential from existence. I'm Siobhan Colleen. This is Industry Explorers. Welcome to Industry Explorers. I am your host, Siobhan Colleen. Today, we have a really awesome guest, if I may say so myself. Jim Shumway has done a little bit of everything in his meanderings through the world of live entertainment. Drawing on his varied interests, he has brought creative solutions to artistic challenges, large and small. I promise you this will be a very interesting conversation. How are you doing today, Jim?
Yeah, good. It's a Saturday morning. You know, we got through the work week, and now we're gonna do this for a while. This is gonna be fun.
So I am very interested to dive right into the trajectory of your career, because in front of me, I see McDonald's, I see a carpet cleaning company, and then you jump right into Blue Man Group, Opera Boston, Cirque du Soleil, and today you work for TAIT Towers as a senior project manager. So this will be a very interesting conversation. Now, when you were in grade school, middle school, high school, you wanted to be in technical theater, but what inspired you to pursue technical theater at such a young age?
It's a really good question. Actually, even before that, in elementary school, I think maybe it was like 6th or 7th grade. I can't really remember. I wound up by chance helping out a theater company in Yonkers, New York. I lived around the area at the time in Westchester. And I don't honestly know how I ended up there, but I was helping them with a show they were putting on. It was a spoof of all the Broadway musicals. And at the time, this is like late 90s, so it was called Rant instead of Rent. And they had like a spoof on all that jazz, and all this kind of thing. And it was at the Yonkers Public Library that had a little theater. And I was helping them out. I don't know how I ended up hooked up with them. And then I got the bug, right? So then but my family moved from Westchester County, New York to Connecticut as I was going into 8th grade. And the first thing I did was like seek out the drama club and was working with them on shows. And it must have been, I guess it was my freshman year of high school, turned to some of the seniors that were also really into it. I was like, hey, what do you do if you want to keep doing this after high school? Because certainly public school at the time, and I'm sure it still is, from freshman year of high school, is like, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Figure it out now. And you have to go to college and all this kind of stuff. So it turned to the seniors and was like, what do you do if you want to keep doing this? And a number of them were continuing, if not in technical theater, in the arts, maybe writing, maybe going for acting instead of technical theater, but continuing in the arts. And it was like, oh yeah, you can go to college for technical theater, which was like a like, what do you mean you can go to college for this? What are you talking about? And started, looking at the schools that you do when you live in the Northeast, right? NYU and Emerson and North Carolina School of the Arts and Carnegie. Looked at all these places, and Emerson was the place for me, obviously. And, fast forward several years, applied early to Emerson, only applied early to Emerson, got in, thank God. Did just well enough on the SATs to do that. And so that's where you see that jump from like, McDonald's and carpet cleaning, like those were high school jobs. But even in high school, I was working professionally, by the definition of professional being you get paid for what you do, at community theaters in New Haven, Connecticut, a place called Act Two Theater that was based out of Albertus Magnus College. We worked there. We worked for community theaters over the summer, putting on, shows. And it was, we just kept doing it, right? It's the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, right? By the time I got to Emerson, I probably had a good chunk of those 10,000 hours down on very small scale productions. But as I'm sure we're going to talk about throughout this, the fundamentals apply to everything. The way those of us at TAIT keep walking into rooms and looking smart is by applying the fundamentals from those basic, like terrible high school productions of Grease. Like it's the same solutions. It's just more zeros attached.
More zeros attached, yeah, because you guys deal with like amazingly expensive projects. And it's so funny that you really hone in on the fundamentals and the basics, because I recently interviewed Alan Stein Jr., and he often talks about a time where he was watching Kobe Bryant during a practice early in the morning, like 4 in the morning. And and Kobe's doing these basic drills. And Alan asks him, why do you do the basic drills? Doesn't that get boring? And Kobe's like, no, man, that's, you have to do the basics. That's how you become the greatest, right? And of course, I'm paraphrasing this whole story, but if you go to Alan Stein Jr. and you check out his YouTube, he tells that story in a couple of clips, and it's absolutely true. Going back to those fundamentals and basics. And you mentioned that you got the bug when you were in middle school and you were doing like technical theater at a library, right?
Yeah.
So so community theater. Now, did you do community theater and high school theater? Like, did you?
Yeah.
You were involved in both?
We worked. There was a crew of us back in North Haven at that time that really all we did was theater. Like, and school was just in the way of getting to theater. So a common day back in those days during the school year would be, wake up early, go to school. After school, do drama club rehearsal or building the set or whatever the thing that had to happen that day for the drama club. We'd do that till like 6 p.m. And then we'd hop in my car, which was a 1987 Oldsmobile Delta 88, powder blue. Plenty of room though, a yacht of a car. And we would jump in that. We'd drive down to New Haven and we would do like, we'd grab food on the way, probably from McDonald's, because I'm sure I was getting free food at the time. And we would spend another like 3-4 hours at Act 2 doing the same thing, putting the sets together, running rehearsals, and we'd be there till like 9 or 10. And then we'd all head back home. I'd drop everybody off. We'd go to bed and we'd wake up and do it again. And then on the weekends would be like, I did breakfast through lunch at McDonald's. I did like 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. So I'd do that all day. And then we'd jump over to Act 2 for afternoon, evening rehearsals. Or if it was the summer, we'd jump over to, I think it's called Thornton Wilder, or it was, which is another library with a theater. And we'd be helping out another community theater there doing summer productions. So yeah, I mean, it was just, we were all always working.
When you were working at McDonald's and at a carpet cleaning company, how did your time working in those places help you as a member of community theater troupes?
Oh, interesting. Well, McDonald's, working the drive-through at McDonald's on weekend mornings and weekend lunch shifts will teach you how to process information quickly. Mm-hmm. Because you've got the headset on, which is definitely a skill that then applies later, right? You got the headset on, you've got information coming in, you're punching it into a screen while you're also trying with your non-dominant hand, in my case, left hand, to try to like wrangle, like, no, the fries go in this bag for the next guy, for the next car that's pulling up. So that multitasking for sure. Also, interpersonal relationships for sure. If you work at a McDonald's, you're going to meet some interesting people that you work with, right? Like that's one of the great melting pots in American culture, frankly, is working at a McDonald's. So you end up with these social skills that you may not have otherwise had, especially, I mean, I moved in the course of primary schools. So you get that rep at meeting new people and trying to connect. But like if you've grown up in one place your whole life and you've been going through school with the same group of, depending where you live, 30, 100, 200 kids, right? You never get those reps at having to meet somebody, diagnose what they're about, and make a connection with them. And working at McDonald's, it's a little bit of a turnstile situation, right? People are coming, people are going, people are getting fired, right? And you meet some really interesting people. So that's definitely a skill that got built up there. And hearing your own voice in your ear on a headset, like, that's weird for some people, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely that one. The biggest thing I took away from the carpet cleaning thing is something that's in my book, which is the idea that perception is 9/10 of the law, right? Which is that reality to some degree doesn't matter. How your customer perceives reality is one of the only factors that matters, or it matters way more than what the facts of the matter are. And the way you see this in steam cleaning carpets is there are places you could go and do an excellent job, but there's a stain that you just couldn't get out or whatever. There's some circumstance where even though you did a stellar job, you improved the look of that carpet by 80%, the client still isn't happy because it looks dirty. And equally and oppositely, like in carpet, in particular, if it's a really plush carpet, it's going to look clean just when you drag. You don't even have to turn the hot water on. You drag that wand over the carpet, it looks clean because you stood it all up, right? And so there were jobs that we did a crap job at that we got rave reviews for, and the opposite. And that's really where you get to this, like, perception is 9/10 of the law, right? It matters the how the client feels about the facts matters as much, and in my opinion, more than what the facts are.
Oh, I absolutely appreciate you talking about McDonald's and the carpet cleaning company in that light, because a lot of times, at least when I was growing up, I grew up hearing the phrase, oh, you don't want to work at McDonald's. Oh, you don't want to work at McDonald's the rest of your life. And it's like, well, sure. Like, as a place to start, it's fantastic. And clearly, just me hearing you talk about the things that you've learned there, I can imagine what that looks like for you in live entertainment, right? You're talking about multitasking, the headsets. I'm thinking stage management. You're talking about how perception, how reality, isn't always gonna be the way that people treat you, right? Like perception is 9/10 of it. So, and now I'm thinking about how you handle clients, right? And of course, clients for you is not what clients look like to everybody, right? Clients to you could be Beyoncé and Shakira and Miley Cyrus and, just little names here and there. So
yeah, absolutely.
But
and
that goes
we
back
deal
to the
with them, and
fundamentals.
more often we're dealing with the people around them, right? It's the people in their
Right.
orbit.
Mm-hmm. Right. So, all right, so high school, you learned some amazing fundamentals and basics, both in your starter jobs and in community and high school theater. So then you go to Emerson College. I feel like the more people I meet in the live entertainment industry, I'm meeting a lot of people that are graduates of Emerson College. I grew up in SoCal, so I'm a Cal State Fullerton gal. So Emerson was never in my radar up until recently.
Yeah, Emerson has a huge Southern California contingent. I mean, now they have a campus in LA. That was something that started while I was at Emerson. But Emerson in the film industry, huge. Everybody in the film industry has heard of Emerson because there's just a huge delegation of kids that graduate Emerson, move to LA, and become working professionals. Not a ton of super famous people out of Emerson. There's a nice list, but it's the same. It's the same quality and the same quantity that like East Jesus Nebraska University could probably list. Like random A-, B+ celebs.
Mm-hmm.
But really, there's a huge contingent of working professionals that came out of Emerson in LA for film. There's a lot of us in theater too, but it's more, the deck is more evenly shuffled with the other places, with the Yales and Carnegies and North Carolina School of the Arts and those kinds of places.
Yeah. So I think it's awesome that you list all of these colleges, right? Because high school students listening to this may be thinking about, where should I apply if I want to do technical theater? And, I'm a rigger, you're an automation, senior project manager. I loved Cal State Fullerton. I thought that was an awesome school. Honestly, I did not appreciate it as well as I should have while I was a student there. But in hindsight, I'm like, damn, that was a good program. I am glad that I went through that. So, for anybody listening, Cal State Fullerton's a good one. Emerson College is a good one. You mentioned Carnegie, Yale. Do you have any other suggestions for kids who are, trying to write down that list of where to apply for technical theater?
Definitely look at North Carolina School of the Arts. Definitely look at NYU. And there's a lot of great programs out there. I have, you'll be shocked to hear this, I have really strong opinions. There's the one of the big reasons I went to Emerson was that it was in a big enough city to have other organizations in entertainment that you could go work for while you were at school. And that not only that option existed geographically, but that the school encouraged you to do so. So, I don't want to necessarily denigrate any other programs, but as you look into those programs that maybe seem to be in a more advantageous geographic spot, look into that, though, because there may be roadblocks to that from the school. The school may not want you to do that and therefore kind of put roadblocks in the way, depending on the union situation in various geographic locations. You as a college student may just prevent you from getting to work. So I wanted to get a lot of reps in. So that was a big part of Emerson. The other big part of Emerson for me was when I went to tour the college. First, the facilities were gorgeous, but really that has baselined over the last 10 years. Every college has the same kind of stock of spaces. Really what it was the people. and not the incoming class, because obviously I didn't know them, although that incoming class and that group of kids at Emerson at that time, we all still keep in touch. It's a great group of people. But it's the professors, right? Think about it like the sports analogy may not land for everybody, but you see these college kids going into college football programs, big college football programs, they pick where they're going based on the coach, right? And their relationship with the coach and how that person interacts with them. And like, do those people mesh? Same thing, right? You should be, when you go for your college interview, you should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing. You need to know if this is a place you want to spend 4 years, number one. And number two, give them a 6-figure sum of money, right? Like this is going to be the biggest purchase you make in your life until you buy a house. So really think about it, really beat it up. So that would be my advice. And, then tertiarily, like make sure you're going somewhere where the curriculum is keeping up with the industry. The industry technologically is advancing and advancing and advancing. And there's a lot of places that are still teaching the same curriculum that they have forever, which is like how to do the original Broadway production of Pippin, which, while interesting and while important fundamentals, should not be a 4-year curriculum. That needs to be the first year maximum. Really, it should be the first semester, in my opinion. And then let's go. There's more to cover.
Yeah. I want to also throw out there University of Nevada, Las Vegas. That was another school that I personally considered because they had a hybrid theater and engineering program. And a lot of people, come out of there working for Cirque du Soleil. And
Cirque has a lot of, I mean this in a good way, Cirque really has their hooks into that program and is constantly feeding them curriculum and telling them like, hey, if you teach your kids this, we will hire them. Obviously, COVID notwithstanding, that's another thing, but
Yeah. So no, I think this is super solid advice, and I didn't expect that to be part of your answer, but I'm glad that you said all of that because I'm sure this is going to help. This is going to help anybody who listens in, right? Especially if you're interested in technical theater. So yeah, I wish someone told me that when I was considering other schools, get to know the professors and the staff and, interview them and figure out if it's a good mesh for you, because it is more than just, oh, this feels right. This campus is beautiful, because most campuses are going to be beautiful, and a lot of campuses are working on their upgrades. They upgrade their libraries, they upgrade different schools or different halls. So,
and the theaters have all gotten upgraded in the last 15 years or so, because when you upgrade a theater, it takes good pictures. It looks good on your website to parents of not theater kids, right? You can dramatically light a theater and take a beautiful picture. And, parents of kids that are going for philosophy go, that theater looks gorgeous. What a nice school.
Oh, yeah. So you mentioned making sure that the curriculum is keeping up with the industry. And in my mind, that looks like at this point in like my professional career, if I had a kid considering a school, I'd be like, well, are they teaching anything about LED walls? What's their automation program look like? Are they teaching mapping? Are they doing show control and show mapping, which some of the things that I just mentioned were at Cal State Fullerton. Show control was such a cool class because to me, that's what everything at Disneyland is all about, right? And TAIT works very closely with Disney. So, but what does that curriculum look like to you? Like, what are some of the things that kids should be looking for if they're really looking into the curriculum?
Well, it depends what you're going into, right? It depends what you think your emphasis will be, right? Lighting or sound or rigging or automation or, scenic design or lighting design. You will more than likely change your mind about that over the 4 years of college, what that emphasis is. So look at the whole picture. But it's about, if the curriculum looks like only things you've already done in high school, that's probably not the place you should go, right? Also, there should be nouns on the curriculum that you do not understand, that you have to go Google. That's a good indication that that's a place you should go.
That's a good one. Yeah, that's a really good one. There you go. All right. So I feel like we went on this really beautiful tangent, and I want to bring it back to you and your story. So when you were in college, you were involved with the Blue Man Group, Opera Boston, and the Majestic Theater, and various other organizations around Boston at the time.
Yeah, I can't remember their names. I'm really embarrassed. I feel terrible about that. I'm an old person, and I can't remember all the names.
No problem. I kind of say that too. Like, I've worked for various shows. So as a student of Emerson, what made you stand out in order to be a Deck 1 sub for Blue Man Group? And can you tell our audience, what is a Deck 1 sub?
Sure. So Blue Man Group, still has a series of satellite shows. The main one is or was in New York. I'm only caveating that because COVID. I haven't been keeping up with which shows are planning to reopen and which shows threw in the towel. So anyway, the main show for Blue Man, the headquarters is in Astor Place in New York City. And Boston was the second show and had been at the time running for like 10, 15 years at the theater. I can't remember the name of the theater either, which is embarrassing. I know the name of the bar attached to the theater is the Chuck, but I can't remember the name of the theater.
Oh my God. I was just going to say, don't worry, I'll edit that out. But no, that was too funny. I'm keeping that. Sorry, Jim.
I was going to call it the Wilbur Theater, which is not correct. But anyway, I digress. That show has been there forever, for all intents and purposes. And there used to be, in a prior generation of Emerson kids, there was a really strong tradition of Emerson kids being the subs. We'll get into what that is in a minute for them. Just, again, Boston geography, for those that don't know, that theater is a block away from the main hub of Emerson's campus. Emerson's downtown. So it's not as though there's like, the Boston Common would be Emerson's green. There isn't a proper campus, but they've really now taken over a big chunk of downtown Boston. Anyway, Blue Man's like a block away. So there used to be this strong tradition and it had faded out. And honestly, I don't think a lot of us even connected the dots that Blue Man is there and that we could go work for them. And through a series of other interactions around Boston, working everywhere that we worked, it was like, oh, hey, Blue Man's looking for a Deck 1 sub. You should apply for that. I was like, oh, I can do that? That never even crossed my mind. Like, surely the people that work there work all the shows. Because when you come up through high school theater and you're in college theater, the notion of like a show running indefinitely and the logistics around that have never really crossed your mind. So a sub, as they call them at Blue Man, is someone that is trained. So a Deck 1 is a track in the show. So unlike in high school theater where it's like, all right, Johnny, you know what you're doing, and I know what I'm doing, and Cindy, you know what you're doing, and we're all going to go do the cues. That's not how it works in real theater, because John or me or Cindy might not be here tomorrow. We might get hit by a bus. We might get sick. We might want a vacation.
What?
So the tracks are not people's names. The tracks, the backstage tracks, are not people's names. They are positions. And at Blue Man, they were Deck 1, Deck 2, Deck 3. I think there's a Deck 3. It's been 100 years. I apologize. There's a rigging position, light, sound, et cetera, et cetera. So they had a full-time staff. They had permanent members that were the starter, if you will. Again, we'll make this a sports analogy, the starter. And then each one of those had two subs. So these are people that were trained to know the track, who could come in and do the show when the original person wasn't available. And you were guaranteed, you were guaranteed one show every 2 weeks just to stay fresh on it so you didn't forget the details. And then depending on who your permanent member was, you might be there a lot, and then that person would be like, hey, my two subs, I'm going on vacation for Christmas. Y'all can't go home for Christmas. That happened all the time. And then of the subs, a lot of people, I didn't, but a lot of people learned more than one track so they could pick up more work, right? If you could be a Deck 1 sub and a Deck 2 sub and a Deck 3 sub, well, now you got 3 opportunities to get in there and do shows, right? So that was a nice little side thing. Obviously, it looked really cool on one's resume to be able to say like, and I worked at Blue Man and I've only just graduated college. So that was really cool, but it was a phenomenal group of people there at the time. I'm sure it still is. Really great little community they had created for themselves, and they welcomed me in, and then I started bringing more Emerson kids in behind me. I don't know if that tradition continues today, but it was a great place to be. Right people, right time, great experience. And working on a real proper professional show. It was great.
What were some of the top, most helpful courses required from your BFA program?
Wow. Well, there's a lot of fundamental stuff. Certainly when I first got out of college, I used my AutoCAD skills a lot because we got released into, when I graduated college, that was right at the housing crisis time. So we got released into a pretty rough job market, maybe not quite as bad as what people graduating now are walking into, but very similar. I'm not a statistician. I would defer to somebody else which one's quote unquote worse, but we're also not trying to win that medal. So it was a really rough job market, and being able to have a lot of tools on your belt was a great selling point when you were trying to sell yourself to various organizations. So I used AutoCAD a lot as a real concrete skill. The most valuable class to date that I took, and I've said this multiple times, was a class that was started by a gentleman who still teaches there called Scott Pinkney, which was called Business of Design. And this, while it was about design, it applied to anything. And it was really a class about how to represent yourself in a negotiation. And so he told a lot of stories about ways he had been hustled over the course of his career. Scott Pinkney's a lighting designer of note, worked on, oh my God, I just blanked on the name of the show he worked on, but he worked on a show that won the best musical Tony or the best play Tony. So, that he has a chunk of that, obviously. So it was just business of design, and it was how to represent yourself in a negotiation. And I've used built on those skills over the years. But like, as soon as we got out of college, myself and my best friend, Eric Gershman, moved to Macau to work on a Cirque du Soleil show called ZAiA. And there were some dicey, to no fault of Cirque's, the pay situation was attempted to be changed once we all got out there. And the skills we took away from that class came in enormous help in that moment and onward throughout my career. So that class, more than anything, is the thing that's helped if zoomed out. There are a lot of classes that gave me concrete physical skills that I use every day, but like zoomed out, that's probably the class that's contributed the most to my career. But I don't even think that was required, which I think your question was of required classes. That was an elective.
AutoCAD was an elective?
No, sorry, business of design. AutoCAD, I think AutoCAD also was an elective, but Emerson at the time, and maybe it's still like this, I don't know. My class, the graduating class of 2007 was, I'm making the number up, but I'm close, 13, 14 people.
Oh, wow.
So AutoCAD was definitely an elective for everybody. But like, if you were a TD student, like, yeah, it's an elective, in air quotes. Like, yeah, you don't have to take it, but like, what are you doing if you don't take AutoCAD? What are you thinking?
Right. Yeah, when I went through Cal State Fullerton's program, I was studying for technical theater, and we used Vectorworks, not AutoCAD, but in our scenic carpentry class, the very, very first class you take as a freshman, you go into the lab and you look at all the tools, you learn how to use all the tools, and which was great for me because I had never really used a screw gun in my life, Meanwhile, my other classmates were like, oh yeah, me and my dad build stuff all the time. And I'm like, I wish me and my dad built stuff too. That'd be awesome. That would be an advantage. But anyway, so then in your second semester of freshman year, I believe it is, you have to take like a beginning computer-aided drafting class. And that's where we learned how to use Vectorworks. And that was a required course for our curriculum. But regardless of whether it's required or not, if you are going into technical theater at any capacity, you should absolutely take a computer-aided drafting course, even if you're a lighting designer or even if you're going to go into sound, right? Because you have to know where to put the arrays, the line arrays, and you have to know like how your speaker system is going to interact with the room and with each other. So yeah, that's definitely incredibly helpful.
If you're paying to go to college and you're for technical theater and you come out of it without a working knowledge of some popularly used drafting software, you did it wrong. Bottom line. Like, yeah, you doesn't mean you have to be able to draw a working model of R2D2 in 3D. That's not what we're saying. Although if that's your thing, definitely be able to do that. But like, regardless of what you intend to do in this industry, you need to have a working knowledge of AutoCAD or similar, whatever the new hotness is this week,
And you know what? I like I mentioned earlier, I didn't appreciate the college program that I went through while I was going. Like, I didn't have a good appreciation of it when I should have. And it was only until after I graduated that I was like, holy cow, I had access to so much stuff. I had access to a 3D printer. I had access to every tool in the scenic lab. Like, that's when you pay to get a college degree and you're going through this curriculum and you're going through everything. This is the time to really experiment. This is the time to make mistakes. This is the time to fail. It's a safe space to fail. right? So if something doesn't work out, plus that's even better. Because if you build something that doesn't work out, now this is an opportunity to improve on your troubleshooting skills and your problem solving skills. So that's my personal regret, and that's my piece of advice.
Yeah, it's a great time to fail. It's a great time to take risks, because also, let's not forget, you're paying for the privilege.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
You're paying to be there.
Yes. And once you're out of a program like that, you do lose access to a lot of tools. I will say that. Like I did a research project and I was using EBSCOhost, and I just didn't realize that when you're no longer a student, you no longer have access to all these academic journals, and you no longer have the access to these research projects, if you want to do a review on any of them. Because when you're an adult, then you got to pay that yourself. So,
yeah, you want to read the Yale tech briefs after you graduate college? Go buy the book.
Yep. Oh, adulting. How would you improve Emerson's BFA program?
I have to admit, I'm not intimately familiar with it today. That I am thankfully invited to go speak there from time to time to the kids, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to get to do so. It's usually as part of Scott's business of design class. He invites me in as a speaker there, and I rant and rave about contracts and how to write a resume and how to approach graduating and what to do, or at least from my perspective. Not like I am the authority on that topic. I can just speak from my personal experience. I would love to see Emerson get a little deeper in automation personally. I think the kids that come out of NCSA, North Carolina School of the Arts, are the most actively prepared to become entertainment automation technicians that day. And that's really just that they focus a lot on the electrical and the schematic design, and really, it's not very complicated, but it's very intimidating to understand how all those dots connect. So those kids come out with a really nice wide view of how it all connects, and then you inject them into somewhere like TAIT, and we can be like, cool, we're using Siemens 1500 platform, and this is the specifics you have to know about that, and they can pick it right up and run with it. I would love to see Emerson invest more in that direction to try to send out some more well-rounded kids. We did a little bit of automation when I was there, and I think there's more and more now, and that's why I'm not trying to throw them under the bus. They may have a robust automation program, but I think my perception anyway is even if they do, it's very focused on the mechanical side of automation. Like, okay, it's a motor and a gearbox and electricity comes in, and how do we change the voltage and this kind of stuff. And that's important. That's extremely important too. But understanding it, again, at least having a working knowledge of how the ones and zeros are messing around in the background, very important.
So is there a pattern for your colleagues coming into TAIT? Do you notice like a majority of them coming from a certain school?
Not a certain school. It's certainly, first of all, if you, one thing I love about TAIT is that we are not elitist in that regard. It's not as though like, oh man, we really like this person, but oh, they went to East Jesus, Nebraska University. Harumph, never mind. Hair toss,
Hair toss.
We're very much not like that. Our hiring philosophy tends to be more about attitude and aptitude. Like, as I always say, like that's what I look for in a rigger. I want attitude and aptitude. I can teach anybody how a shackle works, but if you want to be here and you want to learn, those are the two most important things to me. Beyond that, we can inject all the facts into you we need after that.
And the attitude portion of it is like, that's humility. Humility and being humble is part of that attitude, right? We're not talking about like hair toss attitude. We're not talking about snap attitude. We're talking like you are there and you want to learn, and you're open to learning new things, and you're open to receiving criticism and feedback when you make a mistake.
Yeah, and open to doing what needs to get done to get the show open, right? Like mopping the stage is below no one, period. So if someone's going to come in and be like, oh, I have to clean up, like, get out. I'm done with you. I've no use for you. And being a team player, and not like the coded corporate America version of what that has become, but like what those words in that order actually mean. Being a team player. This is a team sport. This is not singles tennis. This is baseball. This is a team sport. We all need to lean on each other, and we all need to help each other. And I always tell new integrators coming into TAIT, there's two rules. Number one, don't be afraid to ask for help. Asking for help is not a sign of weakness. Asking for help is a sign of strength. So don't be afraid to ask for help. That's rule number one. And rule number two is don't ever make anyone else ask you for help. And the point of that is you should be seeing that somebody's struggling and you should go help them before they have to ask you for help.
Oh, that's solid. That's solid advice. I love that. I can't wait to take the clip of what you just said and throw it all over social media. There are 2 rules. Oh, the third rule is there's no crying in baseball. No, I'm just kidding. Question. So was the New York City Opera debacle, I guess, was that before or after Cirque?
That was between Cirques. That was after Macau and before Cusa.
All right. So I'll ask this question first, and then I'll get to the NYC Opera. Can you describe the process of becoming a Cirque du Soleil new hire? Can you take us from the perspective of a job seeker through the application and interview process and all the way to your onboarding experience?
Sure. First of all, what happened could best be described as begging. No problem admitting that. So graduating college, most of us, and this story gets told as us because myself and my friend Eric Gershman did this in parallel. So we applied shotgun style. I mean, we applied to anything that got posted, national and international tours on networks, every Cirque show, every Cirque job, regardless of what it was. A lot of local jobs in Boston, local rental shops, some of the theaters were looking for assistant TDs, all these kind of things. Just apply to everything. At the time, Cirque had a very strong alumni pool in Cirque du Soleil. We had heads of shows, production managers, riggers, and automation people, and I think a costumer or two, but I might be making that up, all employed at various Cirque jobs, some of them on tour, some of them in Vegas. And so we, frankly, that's where the begging came in. We were not shy about reaching out to those alumni. We had tried to form relationships with them prior to graduating for this moment, and we were not shy about reaching out to them to be like, hey, I applied for this Cirque job. Is there anything you can do for me? So that would be a big piece of advice, right? Like when you're picking a school, think about where the alumni network is, and then don't pick a school because you like the alumni network and then not use it. Most alumni are more than willing to help out if they can. So reach out, right? I mean, sending an email, the worst response you're going to get to a "can you help me" email is no, which is fine, right? There's no loss there. You only can gain. So we were working with a lot of the alumni trying to get in, and then the show in Macau got announced. And this is, now Macau is Macau and it's glitzy and it's finished. At the time, the entire country was a construction zone and no one wanted to move. So Cirque had a problem. They needed to staff this show. And they had offered it to all of their internal employees first, as you would expect. And they got some people, but not nearly enough. So then they really opened up who they would be willing to hire. And Gersh and I had a fine resume for people coming out of college, but nothing that would jump off the page at a Cirque recruiter, for looking for a fully formed professional. So that's another lesson is we really, really, really wanted to go work for Cirque for obvious reasons. And if you really, really, really want to go work for Cirque, and it's a difficult thing to get into at the time, you can't also say, oh, but I only want to work in the US, or, oh, I only want to work on because I like scuba diving. Like, you got to be willing to go where no one else is willing to go, right? You got to make sacrifices in that regard. So we got our resumes in to that group and got them actually looked at via an alumni who had already been either he had signed on the dotted line to be the head of automation or was being interviewed and like whatever. So we got in that way. And then someone who was on the recruiting team knew people that I had worked with at Glimmerglass and asked about us through that channel. And we had heard about that. And obviously that went positively. So then we had interviews, and the interviews were, as the Cirque interviews at that time were really like, are you breathing? Do you have a pulse? Cool. And are you willing to come here? So the interview process wasn't that hard. It was with the head rigger who had signed on at that time and the TD, and then I'm sure a phalanx of HR people who I don't remember. And, a lot of them were standard, how do you behave when you're stressed? And what do you think your biggest weakness is? All these very common, boilerplate kind of interview questions. The head rigger only had a handful of rigging questions, and they were all really basic stuff. And certainly coming out of college, we could all recite the breaking strengths of the various sizes of Crosby shackles and steel cables and synthetic ropes. And that can be very impressive in an interview. So that worked out. And then most of the questions, honestly, most of the interview was me asking questions about like the logistics of moving to China. Like I didn't even have a passport at this point in my life. So, it was, okay, how does this, like, what's the pay structure? Like, is there reimbursement for moving? How does the visa situation work? Like, what happens when I land and we don't have anywhere to live? Like, and then, okay, great. You're going to provide a hotel for 2 weeks. Awesome. That's a great answer. What do we do in those 2 weeks? Like, do you guys have a relationship with like a real estate agent? Are real estate agents a thing in China? Like,
I mean, those are great interview questions, though, because when you're interviewing for a job, yeah, they need you for a position, but you're bringing the skill and you're interviewing an employer just as much as they're interviewing you. So I think those are excellent questions. And they probably did, impress the TD who was interviewing you. That just the fact that you are thinking about the logistics for a position very heavily, involved with logistics of a show.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, just for the listeners as well, this was 2007. So nowadays, I'm sure you could jump on whatever Macau's version of Zillow is and have a place picked out before you even get there. That was not a thing that existed at the time. So that was not an option. It wasn't as bad as like, oh, let me open the yellow pages from Macau and find a phone number. It wasn't that bad, but it wasn't where we are today, where you could buy a place, quote unquote, sight unseen, but have also taken like a 3D digital tour through the apartment building.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we got the offer letters pretty quickly after that, and we up and moved to China on 6 weeks notice, and that was that. And then we got to the business of finishing building that theater and building that show.
Wow. So when you say finishing the theater and building the show, what exactly do you mean?
When you are not going into, when you come from high school theater and college theater, the venue already exists. The venue exists. All the infrastructure for the venue already exists, right? There's working toilets and the light switches work, things like that, right? When you build something from as I like to call it, a steaming hole in the ground, there's really two phases of install. And this is very common parlance in the entertainment industry in construction. And it's dirty install versus clean install. So dirty install is like, we got to dig the hole in the ground. We got to put all the I-beams in the ground. We got to put the walls up. We got to do what's called dry in, which means like the building is now weatherproof. Doesn't mean it's done. It means that the weather report doesn't affect what's going on inside the building, which is a phase. That's a milestone. That's a big one. Because before that, it rains inside a lot. So dry in, dirty install, and then clean install is once you get to what's called dust-free in construction, which is frankly an oxymoron. It's a contradiction in terms. We call it dust-free, but there's still people making horrific amounts of dust everywhere. But the point is, like, you've kind of turned a corner from big construction to smaller construction. So clean install is usually when show-specific equipment starts to show up at the venue. So, for example, you wouldn't start putting a precision piece of machinery like a winch in place during dirty install. That being said, we do it all the time. But if given your druthers, you wouldn't do that. You would wait until clean install, and then you'd come and start bolting the winches in.
Right.
For obvious reasons. So we showed up. Well, we were told we were showing up right as we were turning that corner from dirty install into clean install, and we would start helping, because we would all be there, right? The show team of riggers, oh boy, I don't know the actual number, but it was like 20 people, let's say, to keep that show running. So that's a huge labor force that you have to now go, and theoretically an intelligent and educated labor force to go start putting in this precision equipment. So the plan was always like, okay, yeah, I'll bolt the winches to the ground and we'll put the loft blocks on the loft block beams and run the cables and all this kind of stuff, with the vendors who were providing the equipment being the install supervision. So when we got there, it was way further back in dirty install than we had been led to believe, but that was fine. We were getting paid the joke, of course, at the time was we were the highest paid alcoholics in the world, because we would wake up in the morning, go to the theater, have it be confirmed that they still didn't need us, and then we would go to the bar. It was a rough life. So yeah, then when it finally got to clean install, we started doing that stuff and helping. And that's really valuable for the show team to participate in that, because you learn a lot of quirks of the actual equipment that has shown up, right? Like a big toe winch from then Stage Tech, now TAIT, is a stock product. You can read the spec sheet and it is what it is. But now helping install this issue of a big toe, your specific one that has shown up, you can learn a lot of things about that particular machine participating in the install. And that becomes very valuable on a long running show from a maintenance standpoint, when like someone who maybe wasn't there at the time hears a noise from the winch, and other people who were there for the install can say, oh no, when the vendor was here, they said that's normal as long as it doesn't happen more than 3 times a week. I'm making all this up at the moment.
Yeah.
But you get really valuable information like that helps in the long run.
Yeah, and you may end up being the one writing the standard operating procedure if you're involved in the install and you're very intimately aware of how these precision pieces of equipment work. Then you're the one that's going to be writing the inspection plan, the maintenance plan, the operations plans.
You're absolutely right. The information, the education I got being there during the install became invaluable when I wrote the rescue plans for ZAiA, which is the show that would eventually open in that theater, which is still the prettiest rescue document I ever made, mainly because I had all the time in the world to do it. That was like a 30-page rescue document going through every conceivable iteration, and it was really tight. The first draft was the final draft. I believe they still used it even when that show closed a number of years later, because we had thought through the whole process, really understanding how all the dots connected.
Yeah. I try to keep my rescue documentation to 1 page.
Well, it was many 1-page rescue plans bolted together into a single document.
Gotcha. That makes sense. That wasn't a dig on like your process, right? Because
No, but you're totally right. They should be 1 page. If your rescue plans require binding, you've done it wrong.
Yeah, I mean, because simple is better. And I find that that's true in a lot of different applications. I took a little class about programming, computer programming, and you had to make this dot move across the screen, and then you had to like have it go through a maze, and you had to program the directions. And it was a lot of if then statements, right? So the challenge was to write code in as few lines as possible in order to make this dot, do its thing across the screen or finish the maze, because simple is better, right? Why complicate things if you don't have to?
No, exactly. And
it's true for relationships too, right?
Yeah, and the simpler you can do something, the more you prove that you fully understand it. Some things are complicated and there's no avoiding it, but the more you can boil something down, the more you clearly understand how all the dots connect.
Definitely. You accepted a position at New York City Opera in between Cirque jobs, but that didn't happen due to the housing crisis. What were your thoughts and emotions during that historical time?
Well, so by the time that I left Macau, I was very ready to leave Macau. I had enough. I didn't necessarily want to leave Cirque. But, I had worked for Cirque. I had, okay, this is what this is about. All right, good to know. It wasn't the most positive professional experience all around. I was a little disappointed, frankly, in some of in the quality of the show that we produced, which was not our fault, obviously, and was disappointed in the quality of some of the staff. And that goes back to they couldn't get Cirque people to go there. So at some point it was just like, we need warm bodies to fill spots. And so that was kind of disappointing. We had made Cirque out to be this glowing city on a hill, and it turned out to be slightly less than that. So I was a little disappointed. And living in Macau, again, at that time, the whole country was a construction zone. It was not don't get me wrong, we had really good times while we were there, but like take one step back and look at it, it wasn't the best experience. Valuable experience, not the best experience. So I was very ready to leave Macau when I did. And an Emerson alum, and also a person that I had worked with at Glimmerglass Opera, was one of the associate technical directors at New York City Opera, and they were going to expand. They were going to get a big donation, and they were going to expand and do more shows, and they needed a second associate technical director, and Scott Levine is this gentleman's name, called me and was like, hey, you want to apply for this? And I was like, come work with you again? Yeah, in New York City? Yeah, at Lincoln Center? Yeah, let's do this. For those of you that don't know, New York City Opera used to operate at what was called the State Theater, what is now called the Koch Theater, which if you are looking at Lincoln Center from the street, the fountain's in front of you, it's the building on the left. Yeah, so I get on the plane, I fly back, and like literally while I'm on the plane, New York City Opera starts to collapse. It ends up taking a couple of years, but like housing crisis, they don't get that donation, they're not expanding, and in fact, like, oh, you know what? Actually, next year, we're not even going to do any shows in the State Theater because we can't afford the union labor, this whole thing. So yeah, that was the call. I might be telling it slightly dramatically, but like land from the plane, turn airplane mode off, like that was the voicemail waiting for me. So that was lame and unfortunate. But fortunately, I still had a lot of contacts at, I was about to say at TAIT. I still had a lot of contacts at Cirque. And thinking that that might be a possibility, I had arranged for an interview for a rigging position on CUSA, which was then the North American Big Top Tour. So really, I hung out at home for a month, chilled out, kind of got out of the whole like living in Asia mindset that I had gotten in, and waited for that interview. And that interview went super well. And I was on CUSA, only a couple months after that whole episode with New York City Opera.
Earlier in this episode, you mentioned that you had a tool belt full of skill sets and how that was so important to your success, because having concrete skills helps you land the next job and then the next job and the next job. It makes you very marketable. So yeah, I definitely really appreciate that. And now going through COVID, this is something that is true because I have a skill set. Like, I'm a very good instructor. So, and I'm very knowledgeable in fall protection and rescue. So that's what I do now. Is I teach wind turbine technicians how to get out of bad situations. So when you're up and coming professional, no matter what your age is, when you're just an up and coming professional in any industry, it will benefit you to have a strong skill set,
Yeah, a broad set of skills, right? Which is not to say that you shouldn't focus. A question I get all the time when I do college career days or go to colleges and speak is, my professors are telling me I need to specialize. I don't really want to. Who's right? And the answer is, as anyone that's seen me talk a bunch will have heard this before, well, it depends. There's nothing wrong with specializing. There's nothing wrong with not specializing, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to specialize, though, you really need to understand how what you're specializing in, how those dots connect to the things that come before and after it, in front and behind it. Like, that's what's going to set you apart. But you still should have a lot of tools on your belt, right? I am of the opinion that one of the big reasons that I kept getting some of those Cirque jobs before maybe I should have was that I was really proficient in AutoCAD. So when I would be in these interviews, they'd be like, oh, wait a second. So like, you could redraw our truck packs? I'm like, yes, I can draw rectangles, if that's what you're asking. Yes, I can draw rectangles. Oh my God, like our truck plans have been terrible forever. We've been wanting to redo. Yeah, you're hired. And that like, by the time I left ZAiA, I had a lot of Cirque-specific little projects that I had taken on that A, broadened my education, and B, were these things that I could just point out. Like, I authored those rescue plans at ZAiA. That was a big part of my interview for CUSA. Like, by the way, here's this 30-page rescue document I wrote. Like, oh my God, this looks great. And in doing that, learned a lot about how rescue works. I had designed and built a second floor for a storage room that we had. We had this really long, thin storage room on the 5th floor. The grid was on the 7th floor. So I designed and we built a second floor that hung from the grid above it to increase our storage space. So that's a drafting problem. That's a very light, college theater engineering kind of problem. And then an execution thing, right? And to be able to show how like we broke it into small pieces so it would fit in the freight elevator, and to have that whole kind of portfolio piece, I'm making air quotes for people that are only listening, to have that kind of portfolio piece to be able to throw out in an interview, that was huge, right? And that was drawing on lots of different skills to do something that at the end of the day, if you just take a look back and go, yeah, cool, you made a second floor, but there was a lot to consider there. And those are the kind of stories that people that do interviews like to hear. Like, I saw a problem, I diagnosed a solution, and I executed. That's a great story in an interview.
Absolutely. And funny enough, your story reminds me of my own. I've been in that position where I'm like, hey, check out these SOPs and check out this rescue plan. And they're like, oh my gosh, will you rewrite our employee manual? And will you do our safety manual? And, welcome on board with our company. Here's the employee manual. Rewrite it now. Take what you learned from today's expert and play. You heard me? Go play. Just try something new, because that's the best way to discover your passion and purpose. If you found the episode insightful, give Industry Explorers a 5-star rating and tell us what you learned in your review. Subscribe to Industry Explorers on YouTube for more adventures. Industry Explorers is made possible by the support and contributions from explorers like you. Thanks for listening. I'll see you on our next adventure.